Hello, I'm Femi Akec and you're in the stream. Today, 2 years after gaining independence, South Sudan is still experiencing growing pains. With a large youth population, is it time for young people to step up and shape their country's future? Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for your live feedback on South Sudan. It is a party. You can't have a party without Instagram. What you got?
Lots of partying on Instagram.
Right.
We looked up the hashtag South Sudan and pulled up all of these Instagram photos that are on my screen now. People waving flags, people out in the streets, different graphics, people showing their support for the Independence Day 2 years on. But there's also solidarity messages from outside. Dalia on Twitter says, sending South Sudan light and love on its anniversary. May it be happier next year with a democratic, corrupt-free government and a friendly Sudan. Now, for those of you at home, we want to hear from you as well. Whether you're in South Sudan or anywhere else, use the hashtag AJStream.
Joining us in the studio is the ambassador to the US from South Sudan, Dr. Akec. Ambassador, it's great to have you in the studio.
Very excited to be with you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're so welcome. We will be hearing more from the ambassador in just a moment. We are marking South Sudan's Independence Day on today's show, and Al Jazeera is also covering it online. If you want to follow the stories there, go to aljazeera.com/in-depth, which is where I am here, and scroll down and you can see some of the features that we're running on Al Jazeera's website about South Sudan's second birthday. And there's also a Q&A with the UN's top official in South Sudan discussing her decades of work in the country.
Hi, I'm Ninjira Sambuli from Nairobi, Kenya, an Africans Act for Africa ambassador, and I'm in the stream.
So as you've heard, July 9th is a day of celebration for South Sudan. After decades of civil war, it became the world's 196th independent country back in 2011. And at just 2 years old, South Sudan is also the world's youngest nation. Its youth is also mirrored in its population. Roughly 72% of South Sudanese are under the age of 30. Politically, South Sudan is still struggling with the north over oil revenues and its new border. Unemployment is high, access to food is scarce, tribal violence continues, and there are also accusations of corruption which plague the government. So some say this all adds up to a failed state. But can that be changed? And is it up to the youth to chart the course for the future? So ready to weigh in on Skype is Ngor. He's an award-winning journalist and co-founder of NewSudanVision.com. Also in Skype is John Peng Ngong, a civil society leader and journalist. And making a return visit to the stream, we have Azaz Shami, a human rights activist who is part of a Sudanese non-violent youth movement. It's great to have all of you joining us on the stream today. We have to go to Juba first of all with Mading. Mading, can you describe the atmosphere on the second anniversary in South Sudan?
Thank you very much for having me on this stream. People in South Sudan are still excited about independence. Last night, young people went out. As you can hear, my voice is a little bit hoarse. It's because we were roaming the streets of Juba and singing, thank God we have our independence. So there is excitement, but I would say the celebration today on the eve of independence was a little more subdued than the 2 years before.
Let me just bring it...
I almost thought that today was an acknowledgement of independence and not actually a celebration.
John, who's in Nairobi right now. John, can you remember 2 years ago to the day? What was it like?
Oh, it was fantastic. In the first place, we say South Sudan Oye for the second birthday of my country. I was part of the celebration the night before the night of the independence declaration on the 9th of July 2011. It was marvelous. Unfortunately, tonight, yesterday, even today, I'm not part of the noise Mading is talking about. My voice is not hoarse because I am not in my country, and that is the negative part of it. 2 years later. So
I'm also just getting just a sense of how people in our group today are actually reacting to the anniversary. And Azaz, if you think back 2 years ago, what progress do you feel that South Sudan has actually made since that amazing day when the country became independent?
Well, first I want to congratulate them on celebrating the second anniversary and send them all the love and good wishes. I think they came along, but I think there's more to do on the corruption side and the rebuilding the country together. And I think one reason for this procedure to be hindered is because of the North Sudan is not very helpful, and it did not stop the war and all these conflicts. But I think they're coming along, they're coming together, they're trying to build a country, and it's very refreshing, although it's sad to see South Sudan no more part of Sudan, but it's refreshing to see a newborn country making it and people coming together to build their country.
Well, Ambassador Azaz mentioned that there's more to do, and she also mentioned Sudan, and we have some tweets here with people that are echoing what she said. Mohammed Al-Shafi says, there's been a paralysis of both Sudan and South Sudan. Both countries' government should be replaced with other visionary ones. And some more criticism from Bozy, who says, it's been more paralysis than progress. Corruption, nepotism is endemic, huge dependency on oil, other sectors are non-existent. So we're seeing this criticism. Meanwhile, we're seeing, of course, celebrations out in the streets, happy. But are we asking for too much just 2 years after the birth of a nation?
Well, I think we are asking for too much. I was part of the celebration in 2011, and I saw the jubilation and excitement. What needed to be met to meet the expectations of the populace is economic prosperity and security. And fortunately, on the economic prosperity, it was not possible for South Sudan to earn the little income that it was getting from the oil sale. And the oil accounted for 98% of South Sudan's revenue. And so, without the oil, delivery of services and development programs could not be achieved.
Okay, Ambassador, I'm going to get you to just pause there for a moment, because that, you just kind of laid it out. It's about the oil and getting revenues. You are a minority in South Sudan because you were born when South Sudan actually became its own independent country, which is really interesting. But most people in your country are under the age of 30 years old. So I'm really intrigued, Mading, if you can actually tell us, what is it like to live somewhere where there are more young people than older people?
I think I got to know how young this country was on the eve of the actual independence. July 8th, 2011, I went out at night and young people were roaming the streets. They were running everywhere and screaming wildly, thank God we have our country, free at last, and all the things you can imagine. And I looked everywhere and there were young people. And I thought, what about a year from now, 2 years from now, how is it going to be? What will they say? The realities, the hard realities of independence are kicking in. But today I was at the celebrations. I saw the faces of the people. They are still excited about independence. President Paul Kagame of Rwanda said today that independence comes with benefits. It also comes with opportunities. And the ringing theme has been citizenship. Now I can go to the United States of America with a passport from the Republic of South Sudan. What a change. It's not so much about food alone. It's also about identity. Ours was a struggle, and our people have a long, bitter, and deep memory of where we have come from. The challenges we are hearing about predates the Republic of South Sudan. That is why we fought. Have we begun to address them? Absolutely not. And we will have a long conversation ahead.
Let me just bring John into this conversation, John, because I'm curious about, if you have such a large young population, how much power sharing is going on right now?
It's unfortunately, when we talk of how much power sharing, we have heard recently that the SPLM, the Sudan People's Liberation Army, which is the ruling party, has increased the percentage of the women affirmative action to 35%. For the youth, we don't know how much, how many percent, how much percentage. At the moment, when we see the government structures, we are seeing actually at the moment is I would describe it as a leadership by eldership. You are not an elder, you can't hold this position. I remember last year I had an age mate who is a lady was kicked out of the electoral commission because she was 32 years. And you mentioned before that about 72 are youth under the age of 30. Someone is 32, is 33 now. My age mate is qualified with a master's degree in law and is qualified actually for 7 years working with an NGO, UN and the rest of the organizations. Now crossing to the sensitive part of the government, we need a lot of young people to run it. They say you are too young. Somebody
Okay.
32 years, yeah.
So Ambassador, you've got the young people snapping at your heels, and there's more of them than there are of the older politicians. How are you going to work this out between you? Because there's definitely some tension.
But I think the youth are just impatient.
Okay.
And they are getting the best of the service, as far as I'm concerned. The 35% for the women is not only for the elder women.
So this is just so that everybody understands, it's 35% of women in
all the public institutions
Okay.
and political positions.
Right.
Yeah, in the parliament, in the government, and in offices. This is a minimum that must be served. Now, South Sudan, as we have seen, 72% of it is youth, believes that the future can only be guaranteed through the participation of the youth. They have the energy, they have the talents, they have everything.
They just don't have the jobs yet.
Well, because they are majority, those who are in government, those who are employed, are few.
Right.
But everybody wants to get a job. But otherwise, the government of South Sudan is getting many of the youth into positions of responsibility. In most of the states, other than the governors, maybe, many of the ministers and senior officials in the parliaments are youth.
Let's just see what the community's got to say. Malika.
Well, Ambassador, you and I quote you, said that the youth are impatient. And of course, since the majority of our community is the youth, they are talking back to that. Makar Mayek, though, might agree with you. He says that youth, unless they become assertive, they're going to remain the same. But we got a video comment from someone who disagrees. I want you to have a listen to this.
At an individual level, South Sudanese youth are striving to help in the development of their country. But that is limited to a very few number of youth who have access to employment, access to money and power. The majority of youth have not gone to school, and it's very difficult for them to participate meaningfully to the development of their nation. Their government is to devise policies that would encourage them to work, that would protect them to work. But currently our government is facing a lot of challenges. It is not able to move the country forward, leave alone looking at the youth issues.
So if the youth are impatient, Ding says it's because their options are limited. What is the government doing to give them more options?
The government is opening more schools and creating opportunities for training to get skills that are necessary for integrating into active service, whether in the private sector or in the public sector. So most of what is requested everywhere is capacity building, and particularly for the youth. So some of my audience may disagree with me, but this is what I know is being done. This is the government's policy.
Let me just weigh in here.
Yeah, please do.
The debate I'm hearing is not the real debate. It's not about power struggle between the young and the old. It's about basic issues. We are talking about education. We are talking about unemployment, rampant unemployment, and the president, Salva Kiir Mayardit, acknowledged this today that young people are largely unemployed because the government is unable to absorb all of them, and the private sector is non-existent. And the youth issues are not separable from the existential threats that are facing the country.
There's another subject that I do want to bring up because it's the reason why John is actually in Nairobi. And John, you should be celebrating your Independence Day at home in South Sudan. You're not, you're in Kenya. Can you actually tell us that story? Because that's quite pertinent to how the country is developing right now.
Before I give you that, let me talk to my ambassador that we're not being impatient. We were part of the struggle. I joined the movement with the ambassador. We fought in the bush together as comrades at the age of 9, 10, up to this age. So I was part of the movement, and there's no time that I'm going to be called in. I'm already in. Then back to the question you have asked me. Today, the youth actually are not happy. They are not in the country. I was kicked out of my country when I was doing my own business. I didn't ask any minister for the job, but they came in and disrupted this because of the wrong policies including laws to protect actually the upcoming young investors like me. Also, the problem of nepotism, corruption does not allow people with capability to go in and work. Mading, for example, was working with the local radio, but he was kicked out, and he's now coming back with an expertise, with a service for a foreign organization, a foreign media house. Back to myself, I ran away from my country in January. So I'm not celebrating any independence. I'm not a legitimate citizen of South Sudan. I'm sorry to say this, but I'm a refugee. And being a refugee 2 years after my independence, in which I participated, I celebrated the first declaration of independence. This is very pathetic. It's not me alone. I have lost 2 gentlemen, and I ran away for my life. I am here with somebody, John Burkab, and the rest are outside. It's not about employment. It's about creating a conducive atmosphere for the youth to work. What I mean is democracy, is freedom to do whatever I want to do. I fought for that. And if I tell you today, when we were classified as a failed state number 4 in the world, there are some facts about that, though there is some exaggeration. Here, I give an example.
John,
yep.
You mentioned the failed state, and I actually do want to show the audience what you mean by that. So just take a pause for a moment, and I'm just going to open up the conversation a little bit. The 2013 failed states is something that Foreign Policy put together, and I'm just looking across Africa, and there's an awful lot of failed states in Africa, but South Sudan is here. I click on that, and it's ranked number 4 as a failed state. And then there's a whole series of postcards from hell, and then postcard number 4 is South Sudan. Let me just ask Azaz about this. When you saw this, and it got a lot of publicity to see South Sudan as number 4 and Sudan actually as number 3, how do you feel that that's the way that some people in the world are viewing Sudan and also South Sudan?
Well, for Sudan to be a failed state is not a surprise to me because there's no state. For sure, the economy or the use of power and the continuous state of war that we've been since 1989, and it was not a surprise to me that Sudan is on that list. But what surprised me and kind of was sad for me is to see South Sudan on that list, because as you hear the youth talking, they fought for this independence, they fought for their new country, and completely to have a new path, not to repeat again what Sudan has gone through. So to me, it was sad because I see them, they're not learning the lessons from the country that they separated themselves and they fought to separate from. And I don't know what Mr. Ambassador has to say to that, but nepotism and corruption are really, really eating the country, and I'm afraid that you are repeating what NCP is doing in South Sudan.
Ambassador, just very quickly, can you come back to that? Just hold on one second. We've got a post show, so the conversation will continue there. But Ambassador, if you could just respond to Azaz first of all. Everybody wants to talk to you. You're very popular today.
Azaz, I strongly feel that South Sudan is completely different from Sudan. We have learned from the mistakes of Sudan, and we are avoiding the bad ones, and we are picking up the good aspects of it. However, what is being reported in the media is what is taken by the Fund for Peace, the U.S. Fund for Peace, which determines the level of placement in the failed states index. So it is a collection of articles, some of which are exaggerated, others not well founded.
Okay, so let me just bring in some of our other guests before we run out of time in this show. Mading, I know you wanted to jump in, so go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to respond to John Penn. He was talking about my departure from the country. I get to speak for myself. I wasn't kicked out of my country. I went back to my second home, Canada. I stayed longer. Let's be honest here. I'm not sitting here and saying that the Republic of South Sudan is the country we fought for. It is not the country we fought for. We have so many challenges, whether in the press. Ours is an oppressed press, and it's predictable. There are no systems in place. My hope is that our leaders are able to acknowledge these challenges, and we can work to overcome them. I believe in the people of South Sudan. I believe that we will be able to overcome our challenges, and the world should not lose patience, because it is the world that made us to be us. We got our country because the world voted through a consensus for us to join the League of Nations.
Mading,
so we thank the world and we say,
Mading, I want to ask you something.
And we can grow.
Mading, I want to ask you something because...
I have to come in.
Yeah, no, well, hold... So who wants to interrupt me first? I want to
interrupt you first.
Oh, well, you're the ambassador, so make it a quick interruption, ambassador. Go ahead.
Mading, no, we were not given our independence. We took it after a long and bitter struggle. So here we are set our culture, our freedoms, our political rights, economic development. So to assume that it was given to us is not correct.
Mr. Ambassador, my point was not that we didn't fight for our independence, but we didn't do it alone. We did it with the world, and we cannot grow this young nation without the world. That is precisely my point.
Mading, let me just bring in John. John, go ahead.
I have some correction to make here. When we are talking, we are not fabricating this through the press picking it up from the victims. I'm a victim, but let me rush through the comparison between Sudan and South Sudan. I'm not seeing the difference. Now, the difference is just the skeleton of our independence. We have a national anthem, the coat of arms, and the flag, and the rest, and the president, and all this. But we need a flag, and the flag must be put by everybody. God told Adam to produce more people to actually subdue the world. Now, what I'm talking about is, when we see what happened in Khartoum and we took up arms, it is still happening in Juba.
Okay.
For example, I am a refugee in 2013. My sister is a refugee in 2013 and she was a refugee in 1993. Is an attack that happened in Wow, for example.
John, I'm going to ask you to take a breath right now, because now we're getting into deep territory that only if you're an East African and perhaps a South Sudanese or from Sudan will you actually understand where we're going to. So we're going to pull it back so that all of our international community can appreciate the conversation. We will come back to you. So we've got Mading, we've got John, we have Azaz, we have the ambassador for the US from South Sudan. Wow, there's a lot of passion in this conversation. You're looking very calm on the surface, Ambassador. Are you ready for the post show?
Very.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Malika, how's the community doing?
They're ready for the post show as well.
Okay, excellent. I'm ready for the post show too, but let me tell you about the next show that's coming up. Now, technically, nobody owns the internet, so why is it being dominated by so many big tech companies? Some netizens aren't happy about this, and they are fighting for more public spaces online, like Wikipedia. Are you intrigued? I do hope so. More about that tomorrow, but more about South Sudan and its anniversary, and looking forward right now at stream.aljazeera.com. I will see you where we always will be, online. Thanks for watching. Hello there, this is the Post Show. Today marks the 2-year anniversary of South Sudan gaining its independence, and we're talking about the role of the youth in shaping the country's future. Weighing in today, we have Dr. Akec. He is the ambassador to the US from South Sudan. Madame Ngor is an award-winning journalist and co-founder of NewSudanVision.com. If you hear his voice being a little hoarse, it's because he has been celebrating for the last few hours, but it's still pretty powerful. John Pendagong is a civil society leader and journalist, and Azaz Shami is a human rights activist who is part of a Sudanese non-violent youth movement. I want to get back to the conversation, and I want to get back to Azaz, because Azaz, you're outside of Sudan, outside of South Sudan, so you've got a global perspective on this. When you hear this discussion, what are you thinking?
Well, again, I feel like being youth, and I do understand the frustration that these gentlemen are voicing, and we hear the news and we see them, and I kind of agree with the ambassador when he said they're impatient, but not the part that they're impatient, but I'm saying that the time is too soon to judge. But I feel like there were some measurements that the government could have taken to make this process faster. It's not acceptable to hear that someone is a refugee and escaping his country that was just gained independence. That doesn't make any sense to me. And this again brings a question about human rights situation in South Sudan, which will make me again make the analogy that they're really actually not learning enough from the experience in Sudan.
So Azaz, I just want to ask, when people say human rights situation, you have to tell us what the human rights situation is. You can't just say it.
Well, like freedom of expression. I know there was an attack on one of the artists at some point. Some journalists were facing some serious threats to their lives if they report about corruption and all that. The thing is, all these are like a vicious circle. Once you have corruption, once you have a failed state, then of course the second thing going to happen is the human rights situation going to deteriorate. We have an example now on the show that someone is a refugee. When did the government come to place? When did this whole country come to place that you're already making refugees? I think this is a very alarming situation, and especially their youth. They fought the war, they fought for their independence.
Right.
They're speaking them like they should not be in exile. They should be in the country, making correction, making observation, and being heard and listened to, and be part of the process they want.
Okay, Malika.
Mading, I want to jump in here because Mading, I want you to comment on something that Azaz just mentioned. She brought up journalists, and so we have to, of course, talk about that because we have tweets about it. Hannah McNeish's 13 journalists were banned from attending a South Sudan Independence Day celebration a day after the country passed the Access to Information Bill. Mading, you're currently launching a TV show. You're a journalist. Tell us about the situation for journalists in the country.
It is correct to say ours is an oppressed press. We are oppressed as journalists in the country, but it's not us alone. This is a militarized society that is trying to transform itself, and we are going to experience these flight points. They will happen. They are natural, but they are unacceptable. And what we want are real, concrete solutions. So I'm gratified to say that that we have the Media Authority Bill has been passed, and there is now a law in place. That is how you address the challenges. We cannot fight for human rights by shouting about them, but we have to do take concrete steps to fight these challenges. I was almost kicked out of the independence celebration today. And I always say, nobody is illegal. Why should I have an ID that national security has to provide?
Okay, Mading, stop talking for a moment so the ambassador can respond to you. And I also
have a law.
Okay, so the conversation works like you stop talking, then the ambassador then talks, and then we actually get somewhere. So, ambassador.
Yes, Brother Mading, I think without the law which has just been passed regulating the work of the journalists has been difficult. And it had to take this period of time so that the bill is not rushed, so that the bill is studied by all experts, journalists, and politicians. And yes, when there is no law, whoever applies the law may either under apply it or exaggerate his or her action.
So, Mr. Ambassador, what is on your to-do list? There's obviously a huge list of issues that South Sudan is grappling with. For instance, 90% as an estimate are under the poverty line. Most of the women in South Sudan, they're illiterate. There's so many people who actually can't get work. And then you have this incredible oil and mineral resource at the same time. So it's almost like you're blessed and you're cursed. So what is on your to-do list? What's on the government's to-do list that you can actually tell our young guests, but also the young people of South Sudan that this is what you're planning?
I think South Sudan is blessed with the natural resources it has, particularly the oil. And as soon as the oil exploitation and exportation resumes, South Sudan is embarking on a number of priorities, including the development of infrastructure,
Okay.
road communication,
Right.
which is going to take a number of youth to work on. Again, on food production and on managing security.
How long does that take? Because I think the reason Mading and John are so upset is that this is the 2nd anniversary, and I don't think they've seen much in the way of change. How long is this plan? You told them to be patient. So patient until when?
Until we start producing, until we restart producing our oil so that we can use the resources for development.
When is that, Ambassador? I'm not going to pin you down to a date.
Yes.
I don't expect a month and a date. But a timeline. Is it a decade?
6 months.
Okay.
6 months from now.
Okay.
Because
the oil is producing. What is the ambassador talking about? The oil is the production is started in April. So what we are talking about is when the proceeds from the oil will come. That is the question.
So Mading and John and Azaz and Ambassador Koch, there's so much more to talk about. I'm imagining that this conversation is happening in a more animated way in South Sudan. And I want to thank all of you for giving us a little insight into where you are as a country and what's going to happen next. So right now, we're going to say thank you to all of our guests. We really appreciate them being part of this program. But we're also going to look at some of the other stories that we're keeping an eye on the stream. And here's Malika with those.
A new tool from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is now giving you a chance to see how your digital footprint is tracked. The tool, named Immersion, scans your Gmail account and creates a map of circles and lines to highlight who you talk to and how often. Derek Harris, a writer at tech site GigaOM, did a thorough investigation of his own data and found that users are revealing more information than they believe. Harris's data shows not only how many emails he's sent, but his collaborators and frequent connections. Metadata collections become a hot-button issue since recent revelations about U.S. government surveillance came to light. Well, Immersion's creators say now the world is catching up to what governments have long known. Next, Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black teen who was shot and killed last year, has become the aggressor in a mobile game, and many are crying foul. The game Angry Trayvon has been available since December, but recently caught attention as the trial of his shooter is underway. The character of Trayvon is shown roaming the street dressed in a hooded sweatshirt, wielding bats and other weapons. Miss Moore tweets, "The Angry Trayvon game is clearly proving that society views black men as hostile, angry, mad. So in any aspect, it's disrespectful." And Sherry adds, "The Angry Trayvon game dehumanizes Trayvon Martin in life and death." The game's developer issued an apology on Facebook saying the game wasn't meant to be racist. The game and the Facebook page have since been removed. And there's more reaction to this story on our website, so head over to stream.aljazeera.com.
Malika, you know the ambassador was watching you, enraptured with your news. I'm just wondering, Ambassador, do you have an online life? I was looking for your Instagram account. I was trying to find you on Twitter. What are you doing online?
Only on Facebook.
Oh, you have a Facebook account? Is it
yeah.
open?
It is open.
Can I be your friend on Facebook?
Please, you're most welcome.
What was the last thing that you posted?
Well, I responded to friendly requests.
Okay. The young people out there in East Africa are laughing. Do not disrespect your elders there. You know better. Thank you to all of you. I know you have multiple social media platform accounts. I'm not even going to start with that. It's been a pleasure having you on the program, and happy anniversary, South Sudan. Meanwhile, what should we do tomorrow? Well, on the next show, technically nobody owns the internet, so why has it been dominated by so many big tech companies? Some netizens aren't happy about this and are fighting for more public spaces online like Wikipedia. Are you intrigued? You should be. More on that tomorrow. Until then, we'll be online. Thanks for watching.